Imagine picking up a piece of what looks like broken glass at a flea market, dusty, scratched, and tossed into a box of old junk. You pay £1 for it, barely enough to buy a candy bar these days. You take it home, toss it in a drawer, and forget about it for nearly 2 decades. And who was this mystery woman whose life would change in a single afternoon with one visit to a pawn shop? But what if I told you that forgotten glass was actually a diamond worth millions? You'll learn how experts verified the stone, how close she came to throwing it all away, and how her ordinary life was turned upside down overnight, and sometimes even thrown out with the trash. Could something like this be lying around in your own home right now? Because this isn't just her story. It could happen to anyone. This isn't a fairy tale. It happened to a woman in England, a woman who, for years, didn't know she was living with a fortune hidden in her kitchen drawer. The question is, how many other treasures are out there, waiting to be discovered? A woman who walked through life unaware that, in a small plastic bag, she held a rare 34-carat diamond, one of the most valuable stones ever uncovered by accident. How does something like that even happen? How does a gem worth more than some castles go unnoticed for 20 years? In this video, we're diving into the unbelievable true story of a woman who thought she bought costume jewelry, cheap and fake, only to discover it was a once-in-a-lifetime treasure. But that's not all. We'll also explore the strange world of lost diamonds hidden in attics, passed off as plastic. So buckle up, because what starts as a trip to a second-hand market becomes a lesson in luck, value, and the treasures hiding in plain sight. What she thought was worthless turned out to be worth millions. She was known simply as Anonymous, a woman in her 70s living in the south of England. She wasn't a collector of rare gems or a fan of antique jewelry. It was large. Yes, but the kind of large that screamed fake. To her, it was playful costume jewelry, something to dress up an outfit. Nothing more. She faced the usual ups and downs, bills to pay, family visits, hospital appointments, and quiet evenings with tea. The glass ring never crossed her mind again, until one day, she was preparing to move house and decided to clear out old things. It became a sort of joke among her friends. "Oh, look at you, wearing the Queen's jewels," they'd say with a laugh. But the call she received days later was anything but ordinary. And yet, at that time, she had no idea how much that change would be worth, or how close she had come to losing everything with the flick of a wrist and a trip to the garbage bin. The voice on the other end was trembling. "We need you to come in immediately." That's the part that sends chills down your spine. As she was sifting through her things, holding items up to the light to decide what to keep and what to toss, the old ring glinted again. Might as well check if it's worth anything, she thought. So she placed it in a bag, along with a few other pieces of costume jewelry, and headed to a local auction house. Little did they know, that joke wasn't far from the truth. Still, something about it caught her eye. Maybe it was the way it sparkled in the sun, or maybe it was instinct. She bought it for just 10, about 13 USD at the time. She was just a regular retiree, someone who liked rummaging through local flea markets on weekends, picking up odd trinkets and costume jewelry for fun. He picked up the ring, turned it over in his hand, and held it to the light. Something about the way it refracted the light caught his attention. He didn't say much. He simply said, "Let's have this one looked at more closely." It was never about the value. It was about the thrill of finding something pretty for next to nothing. One Saturday morning, many years ago, she spotted a chunky, oversized stone in a box of miscellaneous items. The vendor barely gave it a second glance. She wore the ring from time to time, not because it looked expensive, but because she liked how bold it was. Years passed. The ring was eventually set aside and stored in a box with other baubles and trinkets. Gathering dust, life went on. She nearly threw it away. When she showed the items to the staff, they glanced through most of it casually. But then one of the specialists paused. Still, the woman thought nothing of it. She went home, expecting a call that would confirm it was, as she always believed, a piece of glass. That was the moment her life began to change. When she returned to the auction house, The air felt heavier than usual. The receptionist greeted her with an odd mix of politeness and urgency. And within minutes, she was escorted to a private room. Waiting inside was a gemologist, an expert who had spent his career identifying fakes, forgeries, and, occasionally, forgotten treasures. He looked at her with a seriousness that made her sit straighter. On the table in front of him was the ring, but now it wasn't tossed in with old earrings or dusty trinkets. It was set delicately on a velvet cloth under a bright, white light. It sparkled with an intensity that made her blink. The gemologist leaned forward and spoke carefully. "We believe this stone is a diamond," he said, "and not just any diamond, a very rare one." She laughed. At first, she thought it was a prank. How could that be? She'd worn the thing while washing dishes. It had rolled under her sofa. She had nearly given it away to a neighbor's child for dress-up. But the gemologist wasn't joking. "We ran preliminary tests. The size, the cut, the clarity. They're exceptional. It's over 34 carats. That number didn't register immediately. 34 carats. All she knew about diamonds was from television ads, small stones set in gold bands. This one was larger than a coin. It didn't fit into any ring box she owned. "There's more," the expert added. "It's what's known as a Type 2A diamond, the most chemically pure type known. Less than 2 of all natural diamonds fall into this category. Type 2A diamonds are so pure they barely have any nitrogen atoms inside, which is what gives most diamonds their slight yellow hue. This one, it was almost completely colorless. And that meant it was rare, extremely rare. The kind of gem that museums loan for display and billionaires bid for in secret auctions. Even more astonishing, the stone hadn't even been cut in the most flattering way. It was a chunky, older-style cushion cut, often associated with 19th century stones. That suggested it had history possibly royal, possibly exotic. The woman, who still thought of it as glass, suddenly felt like she was holding a piece of the past, a ghost of luxury that had survived centuries unnoticed. What she needed to do next wasn't just about money. It was about security. The gemologist recommended immediate insurance, appraisals, and contacting Sotheby's, the world-renowned auction house. This wasn't just a find anymore. It was a global-level discovery, a potential headline in the making. And yet, the woman wasn't fully prepared for what would happen when the stone finally hit the market. Because behind the velvet ropes of the high-end auction world, drama and mystery were already brewing. Who would bid on it? Where had the diamond come from? And why had it disappeared in the first place? What made this story even more astonishing was how strangely common it actually is. All over the world, hidden among junk drawers, attic boxes, and thrift store shelves, treasures like this occasionally slip through the cracks. Literally lost in plain sight, the woman's story wasn't an isolated miracle. It was part of a much bigger phenomenon, the quiet world of misidentified gems. Take, for example, the story of a man in Arizona who bought a paperweight at a garage sale. It sat on his office desk for 10 years before he realized it wasn't tea glass at all but topaz. Or the elderly couple in Canada who discovered a forgotten brooch in their sock drawer that turned out to contain a 6-carat pink diamond worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. These stories sound like urban legends until they're verified by a certified lab. Why does this happen so often? Because natural diamonds, especially older ones, don't always sparkle the way we expect them to. Many are cut in antique styles that don't reflect light like modern stones. Others are covered in decades of grime or damage. They hide in plain sight because people don't know what to look for. In many cases, the people selling these treasures have no idea what they're parting with. Items get passed down through generations without paperwork or provenance. A grandmother's ring becomes a child's toy, or worse, a donation to a thrift store. Family heirlooms fade into obscurity because no one asks the right questions. There's also a psychological element. Most people assume that if something looks valuable, someone else would have already spotted it. So we downplay our own findings. It can't be real, we think. It's too good to be true. And in that moment of doubt, the treasure returns to the box, unclaimed and forgotten once. More pawn shops and auction houses see this every year. Stones mistaken for quartz, rubies mistaken for garnets, gold mistaken for brass. And while most of these turn out to be what people expect, cheap and fake, there are rare moments when something extraordinary appears. Something that makes an expert pause. Something that changes a life. That's why the woman's story resonated so deeply. She didn't win the lottery. She didn't inherit wealth. She stumbled into history. And that's what makes it both so incredible and so relatable. Because if she could find a diamond in a flea market box, who's to say you couldn't? But behind every forgotten gem lies a question. Where did it come from? And what happened for it to end up in the hands of a stranger with no idea of its true worth? The answer to that question would take us deeper into the mystery and lead to theories darker than anyone expected. As experts studied the 34-carat diamond, one question loomed above all others. Where had it come from? This wasn't just a valuable gem, it was extraordinary. Its cut, weight, and purity suggested it hadn't been mined recently. In fact, the shape of the cushion cut was popular in the 19th century, raising speculation that the diamond had a much older story, possibly tied to aristocracy, war, or even crime. One theory was particularly seductive, that the diamond had once belonged to a member of European royalty. Throughout history, large, unmarked diamonds were often removed from their original settings, crowns, necklaces, brooches, and quietly sold or gifted in times of political turmoil. From the Russian Revolution to the fall of colonial empires, many priceless gems vanished without a trace. But not all theories were romantic. Another possibility was far more sinister. The diamond may have been smuggled. Experts know that over the past century, conflict diamonds, also known as blood diamonds, have been illegally traded through black markets, disguised as cheap stones, and eventually laundered into the mainstream gem trade. Could this diamond have once funded war, corruption, or something darker? The gem had no identifying marks, no visible signature, and no documentation, making it nearly impossible to trace. This lack of provenance both raised its mystery and complicated its sale. Because while a diamond of that size could fetch millions, buyers want more than beauty. They want certainty. Without a clear history, the questions around its origin only grew. There was also speculation it had been part of a stolen collection. Decades ago, a series of high-profile jewel thefts rocked London and Paris. Museums, private collectors, and even royals reported missing heirlooms. Many were never recovered. Could this ring be one of them? Was it hidden intentionally, passed down under false pretenses, or sold by someone desperate and unaware? Law enforcement was never officially involved, and no theft report matched it conclusively. But whispers began to spread within the auction world. Some said the woman had unknowingly stumbled onto a piece of underground history, a lost relic that had slipped through decades of silence. For the woman herself, these theories were both fascinating and unsettling. What if someone came forward to claim it? What if it had a violent past? What if she had been unknowingly connected to something dangerous? The diamond, once just a sparkly object, now felt heavier, like it carried ghosts. In the end, none of the theories could be proven. The diamond remained an enigma. But as experts prepared it for public auction, one thing was certain: its mystery only made it more valuable. And once that hammer dropped, its story would become part of someone else, as life someone willing to pay a fortune for a piece of the unknown. The stage was set. Sotheby's had accepted the diamond for one of its most prestigious auctions of the year, held in London, a city where fortunes are made and lost with a single gesture. The stone was listed simply as a 34 carat, Type 2, a diamond, cushion cut, accompanied by an estimate that made headlines: up to $2 million, or nearly $2.7 million. The woman arrived early that day, dressed modestly and keeping to the shadows. She wasn't used to this world of luxury and high finance. She didn't sip champagne or speak in hushed tones about portfolios. She was a retired woman who once haggled for. Tomatoes at the local market. Now she was about to watch strangers fight over a stone she almost threw away. As the diamond was brought onto the stage, encased in a rotating glass dome under precise lighting, a hush fell over the room. Cameras clicked, phones went down. Even among jaded collectors and billionaire bidders, there was a buzz because no one really knew where this diamond came from. And that made it irresistible. Came fast, 250,000. The opening bid, then 500,000. Within seconds, the number passed $1.2 million. Anonymous phone. Bidders joined the fray, their identities hidden, their voices calm but intense. The pace quickened. 2 million, 1.5 million. A man near the front raised his paddle with a slight nod. A woman in the back countered with a subtle gesture. Whispers floated through the room. Some suspected private collectors. Others said the bidders represented museums still. Others believed the diamond was being reclaimed quietly by a family or organization that knew more about it than anyone dared to say out loud. The auctioneer's voice rang out over the rising tension. £2 million. Any advance? A pause. Then one final bid came in on the phone. It was direct, decisive. 2.2 million. The room froze. No one moved. The auctioneer counted down. Going once, going twice, sold. A gentle gasp rippled through the room, followed by polite applause. But for the woman sitting quietly near the back, it felt surreal. That glassy old stone, once tossed carelessly in a box, was now the center of an international event, and it had changed her life forever. After fees and taxes, she walked away with over 1.5 million. It was more than she'd ever dreamed of. But the real treasure wasn't just the money. It was the story, a story no one could ever take from her. A story that started with instinct and ended with something close to magic. It's easy to look at stories like this and call them luck, a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. Lightning in a bottle. But what if it's more than that? What if these hidden treasures aren't as rare as we think? What if we just done to know how to see them? Every home has a drawer full of forgotten things. A shoebox in the attic. A trunk from a grandparent's house. We tell ourselves they're worthless because we've seen them 100 times. Familiarity dulls value. But value isn't about what something looks like. It's about what it is. And most people never stop to question what's been right under their noses for years. There is a psychological principle called inattentional blindness, when we fail to see something extraordinary because we too focused on what we expect. In other words, if you're looking for junk, you'll probably find junk, even if a diamond is staring you in the face. It's not ignorance, it's human nature. This is why experts say we routinely overlook fortune. Not just in jewelry, but in old paintings, documents, coins, and even toys. A rare comic book worth thousands tucked inside a moving box. A first-edition novel collecting dust on a shelf. A piece of pottery from ancient history used to hold spare change. These are not myths. They're real, and they happen more often than you'd think. The woman in this story didn't have gemology training. She didn't use a loupe or study clarity charts. She trusted a gut feeling just enough to hang on to something that felt oddly special. And that tiny decision, made years ago in a crowded flea market, was the thread that unraveled a life-changing truth. That's the terrifying part, in a way, because it means that you could have missed something too. Maybe you already did. Maybe that box under your bed doesn't just hold junk from college or expired receipts. Maybe there's something else, something waiting to be seen differently. It also challenges how we think about value, not just monetary value, but the value of our instincts, our curiosities, our odd attractions to forgotten things. It suggests that the world is full of treasures, not just in vaults or behind glass, but in everyday places, hiding behind assumptions. So the next time you clean your closet, visit a flea market, or pick up something strange at a garage sale, pause for a second. Look again, because sometimes The only thing separating trash from treasure is someone willing to ask, what if it is not just glass? In the end, it wasn't the gem that changed everything. It was the decision to look twice. One tiny choice to save a trinket, to ask a question, to walk into an auction house unleashed a chain of events that transformed an ordinary woman's life. And that's what makes this story so unforgettable. Because the diamond was always there. The value didn't suddenly appear when the experts confirmed it. It was there in the market stall. It was there in the drawer. It was there when she nearly threw it away. What changed wasn't the object, it was the recognition. The moment someone finally saw it for what it truly was. That's the powerful truth behind this entire journey. Value isn't just discovered, it's acknowledged. And sometimes it takes time, luck, and curiosity for something extraordinary to finally be noticed in a world that's constantly distracted. For the woman, the money brought freedom. She paid off her mortgage, donated to charities she cared about, and finally took the trip she had postponed for years. But the real reward, she later said, was the story, a story that reminded her that even in retirement, even in quiet routines, life still had surprises in store. And for the rest of us, her story serves as something more, a nudge, a challenge, to question what we take for granted, to re-examine what we call worthless, and to never underestimate the quiet potential hiding in plain sight. Because if something as unremarkable as a dusty old ring can secretly hold millions in value, what else might we be missing? What treasures are we walking past every day, simply because we never stop to ask? In the end, it's not about finding a diamond. It's about seeing differently, about trusting that curiosity, that pause, that second look, because sometimes that's all it takes. She thought it was just glass, but it changed her life forever.